Now Michael Heseltine has given them a chance to turn a dream into reality. And all this, Mr. Chairman, and a lot more, in 17 months. The left continues to refer with relish to the death of capitalism. Well, if this is the death of capitalism, I must say it's quite a way to go. But, Mr. Chairman, all this will avail us little unless we achieve our prime economic objective, the defeat of inflation. Inflation destroys nations and societies as surely as invading armies do. It's the parent of unemployment, and it's the unseen robber of those who've saved. No policy which puts at risk the defeat of inflation, however great its short-term attraction, can be right. But, Mr. Chairman, our policy for the defeat of inflation is in fact traditional. It existed long before Sterling M3 embellished the Bank of England quarterly bulletin, or monetarism became a convenient term of political invective. But you know, some people talk as if control of the money supply was a revolutionary policy. Yet it was an essential condition for the recovery of much of continental Europe. Those countries knew what was required for economic stability because previously they'd lived through rampant inflation. They knew it led to suitcase money, to massive unemployment, indeed to the breakdown of society itself. They determined never to go that way again. And today, after many years of monetary self-discipline, they have stable, prosperous economies better able than ours to withstand the buffeting of world recession. So at international conferences to discuss economic affairs, many of my fellow heads of government find our policies not strange, unusual, or revolutionary, but normal, sound, and honest, and that's what they are. The only question to me is this: has Britain the courage and resolve to sustain the discipline for long enough to break through to success? Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have and we shall. This government is determined to stay with the policy and see it through to its conclusion. And that is what marks this administration as one of the truly radical ministries of post-war Britain. Inflation is falling and should continue to fall. Meanwhile, Mr. Chairman, we're not heedless of the hardships and worries that accompany the conquest of inflation. And foremost among these is unemployment. Today, our country has more than 2 million unemployed. Now, you can try to soften that figure a dozen ways. You can point out, and it's quite legitimate to do so, that 2 million today doesn't mean what it meant in the 30s, that the percentage of unemployment is much less now than it was then. You can add that today many more married women go out to work. You can stress that because of the high birth rate in the early 1960s, there is an unusually large number of school leavers this year looking for work, and that the same will be true for the next 2 years. You can emphasize that about 250,000 people find new jobs each month and therefore go off the employment register. And you can recall that there are now nearly 25 million people in jobs, compared with only about 18 million in the 1930s. You can point out that the Labour Party conveniently overlooks the fact that of the 2 million unemployed for which they blame us, nearly 1.5 million were bequeathed by their government. But when all that's been said, the fact remains that the level of unemployment in our country today is a human tragedy. Let me make it clear beyond doubt. I'm profoundly concerned about unemployment. Human dignity and self-respect are undermined when men and women are condemned to idleness. The waste of a country's most precious asset, the talent and energy of its people, makes it the bounden duty of government to seek a real and lasting cure. If I could press a button and genuinely solve the unemployment problem, do you think that I would not press that button this instant? Does anyone imagine that there is the smallest political gain in letting this level of unemployment continue? Or that there is some obscure economic religion which demands this level of unemployment as part of its grisly ritual? Mr. Chairman, this government is pursuing the only policy which gives any hope of bringing our people back to real and lasting employment. Indeed, it's no coincidence that those countries of which I spoke earlier, which have had lower rates of inflation, have also had lower levels of unemployment. Now, I know, Mr. Chairman, that there's another real worry affecting many of our people. Although they accept that our policies are right, they feel deeply that the burden of carrying them out is falling much more heavily on the private than on the public sector. They say that the public sector is enjoying the advantages, but the private sector is taking the knocks, and at the same time maintaining those in the public sector on better pay and pensions than they themselves enjoy. I must tell you that I share this concern and understand the resentment. And that is why I and my colleagues say that to add to public spending takes away the very money and resources that industry needs to stay in business, let alone to expand. That higher public spending, far from curing unemployment, can be the very vehicle that loses jobs and causes bankruptcies in trade and commerce. That's why we warn local authorities that since rates are frequently the biggest tax that industry now pays, increases in them can cripple local businesses. Councils must therefore learn to cut costs in the same way that companies have to. And that's why I stress that if those who work in public authorities take for themselves large pay increases, they leave less to be spent on equipment and new buildings. And that in turn deprives the private sector of the orders it needs, especially some of those industries in the hard-pressed regions. So those in the public sector have a duty to those in the private sector not to take out so much in pay that they cause others unemployment. Yeah.